On today's question of faith, what is a Christian response to the Buffalo shooting? Hey everybody, I'm Mike Hayes. I am the Director of Young Adult Ministry here in the Diocese of Cleveland.
And I'm Father Damian Ferentz, Vicar for Evangelization.
Sad day for me. Sad day for a lot of people, never mind me, but I've lived in Buffalo for 11 years. And so woke up, on Saturday and went about my business and actually went to a celebration here in Cleveland for St. Chris's 100th anniversary. Happy anniversary, St. Chris's. Happy anniversary to you, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
It's your ordination anniversary today.
19 years.
When we're recording. But then heard in sort of the middle of Mass that afternoon that there was the shooting at the Tops supermarket in Buffalo, which, by the way, is about 15 blocks, maybe a little longer, from Canisius College where I worked. I'm pretty sure I've been in that store. Like, it's not the supermarket I would generally go to, but at times, like when the supermarket didn't have something, we'd go around to different supermarkets, and I'm sure that I've been there. I've definitely driven past it a number of times, but I'm not sure if I've ever been inside. But I'm pretty sure I probably ventured in at some point. Yeah,
my initial reaction to that story was one of tragedy, and also this happens so often.
Yeah.
I almost feel like becoming desensitized to it. Oh, this is part of our culture, sadly.
Yeah. I remember when all the school shootings were happening, I can't remember who said this, but it might have been President Obama who said, I'm getting really sick and tired of going to these things. We're like, yeah, us too. And imagine all these communities, how sick and tired they are.
For a while, The Onion, which is a satirical newspaper, would run the same headline every time this happened as a way of saying, this is ridiculous. It really is, yeah. And then even after the Buffalo one, there was another one in California.
California, yeah.
And it was like in a church, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. So that it's like a sigh, a sad sigh is kind of where we are, because it's a tragedy.
And apparently there was a second church in Buffalo that a guy walked in and he started yelling things, and the security guards grabbed him right away, but he was armed, and so they stopped it before it could happen. But
the question we asked, so there's all sorts of talking heads on Twitter and on 24-hour news media, but we're here, two Catholics, in our offices at Cathedral Square, and we're trying to figure out how, as Christians, do we respond to this tragedy in Buffalo. So where do you start?
Yeah, I started in the middle of the day on Saturday by reaching out to anyone I knew who was connected to that community. So the Maston community in Buffalo, which is a working class neighborhood, high population of African Americans, and a high population of senior citizen African Americans too, if my memory is accurate. And most of the people who were killed were senior citizens and African Americans. And I would say it's a relatively safe neighborhood to be in. People really depend on each other, and it's a real kind of community where people really help each other. But it's definitely lower middle class kind of area. The director of public safety at Canisius is a woman named Kim Beatty. She was the assistant police commissioner in Buffalo for 32 years before she retired and took the job as director of public safety at Canisius. And so I just texted her, and I texted a bunch of other friends who I know are connected to them, to that community. And I said, look, I know it's a really tough day for you. I just want you to know it's a really tough day for me too. And that that I'm here. I'm praying for you. I'm not in the city anymore. I'm in Cleveland now, but I just want you to know that I'm thinking of you, and I hope you know that I know that this isn't okay. And whatever you need, please reach out to me and let me know what's going on. I got some of the most heartfelt responses from that, and I'm not saying that to be righteous. No. I'm just saying, I think it's important for people to know that you're standing with them, that you care about them, that this isn't okay. This doesn't wash with me,
Yeah,
it's tough.
I think so often when I see stories like this, I ask myself, well, what can I do? And then I think, I don't know if I could do anything.
Yeah.
And then I become sad and despondent. But that response is better if you know people, friends, in particular communities, to let them know that this news also makes you sad. Similar when someone dies, oftentimes you go to the funeral home and I don't know what to say. Yeah. Being there with
That's right.
is really important. Sharing condolences is really important. And then as a priest, a philosopher, as one who's thinking about like how do we, first of all, why does this sort of thing happen, and then how can we respond to it? And I was thinking about the fact that we often in our culture solve our problems with violence. Yeah. So whether it's war or whether it's racism or whether it's abortion or whether it's euthanasia or whatever it is, that we can be used to doing that sort of thing. This person offends me, take them out, or this person upset, and so the response to violence is nonviolence, and that's the way of the cross. And I'm not trying to solve all the problems of the world here and, oh, you're pie in the sky, you're all this. But I do think in some ways we do have to think big picture about how another big picture that is not the kingdom of God has affected us as a culture and led someone to drive 3 hours from his home, wrap himself in body armor. So even if someone was defending themselves, that he would be like he went in and just took out all these innocent bystanders. And you said, so 11 of the victims were African American, 2 of them were white, 4 of them were store employees. Right. Out of the 3 hurt, 2 have been treated and released from the hospital. I mean,
and the other thing, he was there around Easter time beforehand, and he walked in. And he said, why is there a white lady working here? And the security guard, the guy who was actually killed, he escorted him out at that point. And so he probably wasn't armed at that point, but he was probably scouting the place out at that point and then went back to whatever town it is that he's from, which is like 3 hours away.
Well, didn't they say he was there the day before? There was some African-American gentleman who said that I saw him the day before, a couple days before.
Oh. It's really interesting when you look at all the details of the story. I mean, interesting is not the right word, but I mean, the intent that this guy had is the thing that really bothers me most. I mean, this guy basically went online and found like the area that was closest to him that had the blackest population. And like that area is predominantly African American. And I mean, we used to take students there all the time to do service projects and things like that. It's a heavy African American area. I mean, the mayor is an African American guy. He lives not far from there. Canisius, as I said, is not far from there. It's probably the like northeastern point of that area. But like I was really astounded of the intent that this guy had and the lengths he went to, like, scout this area out and say, okay, yeah, there's a lot of black people here, so I can pick off the most people by going here.
And why?
Yeah.
And that's astounding to me that someone in 2022 would think that to be good, helpful, American, whatever you want to fill in the blank, that it doesn't make sense. That's the part we talked before the show, like senseless violence. So there was an intent with a particular community with particular actions, but that doesn't make sense why one would think that would be good to do in any like that action. It boggles the mind.
Yeah, the stuff that they've found on all the social media accounts are all linked to this sort of great replacement theory thing that was motivated. Like the guy who did the shootings in Christchurch in New Zealand, he was espousing this, which basically says that black people, Jewish people, Asian people are coming to replace the white people. And I'm like, really? That seems daffy to me. And so the key to this now is, well, then they say, well, then you should eliminate these people because they're coming to change your life. And that's what this guy seems to have been saying all in his different social media feeds, that I have to take care of this.
The Ku Klux Klan had they were against or are against Catholics. Well, first blacks, Jews, and Catholics. Yeah. And when I used to help out at St. Joan of Arc in Chagrin Falls, the first year that parish opened, there was a cross burned on the front lawn there. So
crazy. A priest once told me that the irrational is never rational, and the more we try to make sense of these things, the less we're going to find. I'm not quite sure if that's the case here. Like, I think this guy thought that what he was doing was rational.
Right, but here's the thing about sin, that ultimately, who is the father of lies? Who is the prince of darkness? It's Lucifer,
right?
The brightest of the angels. So using intelligence and then twisting it and saying this would be good. So you can, think of what people do when they sin. They rationalize it, right? But ultimately, when you look into the face of evil, it's actually not reasonable or rational, because reasonability and rationality have to do with truth. So this is a bending of the truth in such a subtle way that you still think, no, I'm doing something good here. And you're not.
You're not.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Right.
And
that's sin. This is why racism, this is why violence, this is why we can call these things sin, because they go against God's original plan, which is good, true, and beautiful. Even though one may argue, no, this is actually, this is good, and it's not, and calling it out for what it is. I'm interested to see, because this guy, he was going to take his life, right? And then he didn't, so he's under arrest.
The cops talked him down, yeah.
So I'm wondering what he's saying or what he'll say, and if he'll,
on the stand, you mean? Like what?
Yeah. And what were you thinking here?
We'll wait and see. I mean, it's. I'll tune in. And I'll tell you that. The question is, what do we say now? I think for us, I gave one example, but it's interesting to me. Like when we try to have conversations about race in our country now, it's difficult, right? Because most of us don't agree on what racism is. Like we all have different definitions of this. We don't know how to talk about it with each other. I've been part of this journeying together process with the Bishops' Conference. I'm actually doing morning prayer and actually have to preach on this in June. And so this has been a good exercise for me in thinking about this. And we don't always know how to talk about it. We can talk about it in our own cultural groups, which we've done in this process. But then when you start to mix them, people get really uncomfortable. And then that leads us to a third place, is that we just don't have a desire to talk about it sometimes because it's too hard for us to talk about, and we get all uncomfortable. But the truth is that we're called to be uncomfortable as Christians. And if some of our brothers and sisters are suffering, we have to hear them. We have to think about, well, okay, I've listened to what your suffering is. How can I help? How can I be a balm to the wounds that are going on? It's really hard. Pope Francis says that we have to have the smell of the sheep, and I say, well, the problem is that some of us stink already because we're unwilling to have the smell of the sheep. We don't want to have the smell of the sheep, because to have the smell of the sheep means that we have to take on their suffering in some way, and we're never going to know what it's like to be the sheep, right? In this instance, I am never going to know what it's like to be black in America, because I'm white, right? Yeah. I just can't know that.
Right.
But I can listen to what it's like to be black in America, and I can respond to that, and I can stand with people when they're suffering, and I think I'm called to do that. And so I think that's what I'm just going to try to do in the next couple of weeks as best I can.
I guess that's the plan. I don't know. That's the frustration thing. That's the start. But then, yeah.
I was glad to see that the Bishop of Buffalo, the the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops and our bishop, Bishop Mausick, all made really strong statements about condemning the violence this week, and it's gone around. A lot of bishops have really done that because often we're too quiet about these things. But I think that they did a nice job of calling out what was wrong here. So I actually wrote Bishop Mausick a note the other day and said I just wanted to say thanks for writing about Buffalo. I said because there are people who are really hurt there these days.
Yeah, well, that's the bishop's job.
Absolutely. Yeah. Be a shepherd, right?
Right.
Yeah, listen to the voices that are around you too, but then also let them know your voice. I think that's probably a good summing up, right? Mm-hmm. So prayers for people in Buffalo today. Know that I'm thinking of you. I spent a good 11 years there, and really enjoyed my time in the city. It's a city that has a lot of problems. It's been one of the poorest cities in the country for a really long time. I think Detroit, Buffalo, and actually here Cleveland. The three of us have kind of swapped places a number of times. And so here in Cleveland, we'll continue to pray for folks in Buffalo. And one of the churches here in Buffalo that is an African American church is St. Adelbert over in Cleveland. And my buddy Father Gary Chmura is the pastor there. They're one of the parishes that got reopened after a while.
Right, they appealed and got reopened.
They appealed and won and got reopened. There was a nice video that America Magazine did about that. And it's a great community. I know Father Gary said that he really had a fun time doing the synod with them and listening to the voices of that community these days. Do a lot of good social justice work on the east side of Cleveland, and it's just a great place. I've been to Mass there once and really enjoyed it. It's longer than, if you've ever experienced church in the African American style, it's a little bit longer than the hour that you usually get in a quote unquote white church. Mm-hmm. But joyful. You will not be bored, for the lack of a better term. And so our gospel for this week, John chapter 14, do not let your hearts be troubled or afraid. There's never a better message than this week to hear that.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So what do you do in the face of tragedy, violence, when it seems like God is not there or any part of it? The truth is that that's precisely where he wants to be found, in the heart of our heartache, and he wants to untrouble our hearts, calm them, give them peace, the peace that only he can give.
Yeah. And Jesus himself knows our humanity, more, right up close and personal, and knows our suffering, knows our pain, and wants to be there with us. So for the people of Buffalo, people of California, know that Christ is with you this week and that he suffers with you, as we all do. So that's Question of Faith. And we'll be back again next week. If you have a question of faith, you can email that to me, mhayes@dioceseofcleveland.org. And we'll read it here on the podcast. We'll have all this and more next week on Another Question of Faith.